My name is Andrea Shimke, and I'm 29 years old now. I've been sitting on this story for a while, turning it over in my mind like something sharp you're not sure whether to keep or throw away. Some memories don't fade, they just wait. And when they surface, they do it with precision. This story starts when I was 16, and my younger brother Jackson was 14. If you've never lived in a family with a golden child, it's hard to explain the imbalance. People think it just means favoritism, extra praise, a little leniency. What it actually means is that reality bends around one child, while another is expected to hold the weight of the household without ever being acknowledged. Jackson was the golden child from day one, the kid who could do no wrong, no matter how wrong he actually went. I was the responsible one, the built-in backup parent, the example, the fixer, the one expected to absorb consequences so he never had to. When Jackson forgot his homework, my parents said he was exhausted from practice. When I forgot mine, it was a lecture about discipline and priorities. When Jackson got a C, my mom would hug him and tell him he tried his best. When I got a B, my dad would look at me like I'd personally disappointed him. "You're capable of more than this, Andrea." I learned early that excellence was my baseline, not my achievement. And for a long time, I didn't even resent it. That's the part people don't expect. I took pride in being the good one. I told myself responsibility meant value. If I kept everything together, grades, chores, expectations, eventually they'd see me. I made honor roll every semester. I had a part-time job at the local grocery store. I didn't sneak out, didn't party, didn't cause trouble. I stayed out of the way and stayed useful. Meanwhile, Jackson was slowly drifting. At first, it was typical teenage stuff, skipping classes, talking back to teachers, pushing boundaries, just enough that adults brushed it off as a phase. But phases don't usually come with warning signs. The summer before my junior year, those signs showed up in the form of Jackson's new friends. There was Brandon, 17 and already with a juvenile record for shoplifting. He always leaned against our porch railing like he owned it, smirking at nothing. Then there was Kevin, suspended twice for fighting, always restless, always smiling at the wrong moments. They weren't subtle. You could feel the trouble around them, and Jackson knew it too. That was part of the appeal. I tried to warn my parents, carefully at first. "Mom, Brandon has a record. Maybe Jackson shouldn't be hanging out with him so much." She waved it off. "Andrea, stop being so judgmental. You're always looking for problems." I tried my dad next. "Kevin got suspended again. Jackson's changing around these guys." My dad sighed like I was the inconvenience. "You're not his parent. Let him live." Which was ironic, considering how often I was expected to act like one. Every concern I raised was twisted into a flaw in me. I was jealous, overprotective, uptight. My mom even told me once, completely serious, "You should try being more like Jackson. Relax. Have fun. You're always so intense." Right. I'd relax while their son walked straight toward a cliff. By July, Brandon and Kevin were practically living at our house. My parents loved it, bought snacks, complimented Jackson on being social, said they were glad he'd found his people. I felt like I was watching a storm form overhead, slow, heavy, inevitable. One night late in July, I was working the closing shift at the grocery store. I got home around 10:30 p.m. The house was quiet in that ordinary way. My parents were watching TV. Jackson wasn't around, so I assumed he was in his room. I showered, changed, and went to bed around midnight. Around 2 o'clock a.m., I woke up. Not to shouting, not to crashing noises, to whispering. That low, urgent kind of whispering that only happens when something is very wrong. I got out of bed and cracked my door open. Downstairs, my dad was on the phone. "Yes," he said quietly. "This is about Jackson. We'll be right there." My stomach dropped. Then came frantic movement. Keys, doors, rushed footsteps. I watched from my window as my parents sped away in my dad's car, headlights cutting through the dark. I didn't sleep after that. They came home around 5 o'clock a.m. I heard my mom crying. My dad's voice was sharp and angry, and Jackson, my brother, was sobbing in a way I'd never heard before. Not sad crying, terrified crying. I stayed in my room. Something told me not to go down there, not yet. I'd spent 16 years learning how quickly blame could shift in my family. Around 7 a.m., my dad knocked hard on my door. "Get dressed, Fia," he said. "Family meeting." I knew, standing there in the morning light, that whatever had happened overnight was about to be placed squarely on my shoulders. As I walked downstairs, I saw Jackson on the couch, eyes swollen, head down. My mom looked like she'd aged years overnight. My dad was pacing. I barely sat down before he said it. We need to talk about how you influenced Jackson to do this. For a split second, I laughed because I thought he had to be joking. He wasn't. And in that moment, I understood this wasn't a conversation. It was a verdict. The words hung in the air like smoke. How you influenced Jackson to do this. I actually laughed at first. A short, sharp sound that escaped before I could stop it. Not because it was funny, but because my brain couldn't process the accusation fast enough to respond any other way. You're kidding, I said, right? Neither of my parents laughed back. My dad stopped pacing and turned to face me, arms crossed, like he was bracing for an argument he'd already decided to win. My mom sat rigid on the armchair, her hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles were white. Jackson stayed on the couch, head down, silent. That silence would haunt me later. My dad took a breath, the kind people take when they're about to explain something they've already justified to themselves. We talked to the police, we talked to the school, and we've had a lot of time to think this through. My chest tightened. Think through what? What led Jackson to make these choices? My mom said softly, not looking at me, and the environment that contributed to it. I felt a cold wave move through me. You've been constantly criticizing his friends, my dad cut in. You've created tension in this house for months. I stared at him. I warned you. I told you Brandon was trouble. I told you Kevin had been suspended. I said this exact thing was going to happen. And that pressure, my mom said, finally looking up, eyes glassy, made Jackson feel like he had to prove himself, like he wasn't good enough in your eyes. I looked at Jackson then, waiting, begging him with my eyes to say something, to correct them, to admit I'd tried to stop him. He didn't. He just sat there, shoulders hunched, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. My dad continued, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. You've always been so focused on work and school. You never made time for your brother. You weren't present. I felt dizzy. I worked to help this family. You asked me to help around the house. You relied on me. And that made him feel abandoned, my mom said. Compared to you, Andrea, you're always perfect. Maybe he felt like he could never live up to that. The mental gymnastics were almost impressive. I tried again. So let me get this straight. Jackson breaks into his school. He gets caught red-handed. And somehow, that's my fault? My mom swallowed. If you had been a better big sister, Jackson wouldn't have felt the need to seek approval from those boys. There it was, the sentence that rewrote our entire childhood in one breath. I turned to Jackson again. Is that how you feel? For a moment, just a flicker, I thought he might speak. His mouth opened slightly. Then he closed it and said nothing. That was when something inside me cracked. Not loudly, quietly, like ice breaking under pressure. My dad cleared his throat. Given everything that's happened, we've made a decision. My stomach dropped. What decision? You're going to stay with your aunt and uncle for a while, he said, in Pennsylvania. I stared at him. What? You need to be removed from this situation, my mom said quickly, so Jackson can focus on getting his life back on track without negative influences. Negative influences. I laughed again, this time hollow. You're sending me away? It's for the best, my dad said. For everyone. I stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly against the floor. I didn't do this. I tried to stop it. And now you need to reflect on your role in it, my mom said. This will be good for you. Time to think. I felt like the room was tilting. You're pulling me out of my school, my job, my life. We've already spoken to your aunt, my dad said. She and Uncle Robert agreed. Agreed to what? My voice shook. Taking me in like I'm some kind of problem child? You leave in a week, he continued. We're also taking your phone. I blinked. My phone? No contact with friends. No social media, my mom added. You need to focus on family, on growth. It felt unreal. So you're isolating me. We don't want you spreading a distorted version of events, my dad said flatly. I looked at Jackson then, really looked at him. And what's your punishment? My mom rushed to answer. House arrest, community service, counseling. We'll support him through this. Of course they would. He got to stay home, surrounded by love, comforted, protected. I got exile. I was 16 years old, being banished for a crime I didn't commit, one I'd tried to prevent. The week passed in a blur. I packed my room in silence. My parents moved around me like I was already gone. Jackson avoided me completely. The morning we left, my dad drove. 6 hours. No music, no conversation. When we arrived, he handed my aunt a folder with my school records and medical forms. Gave me an awkward side hug, like we were distant relatives. Think about what you've done, he said. Then he left. And just like that, I was no longer their daughter living at home. I was a problem they'd sent away. I stood in my aunt's driveway, suitcase at my feet, watching his car disappear down the road. knowing, deep down, that this wasn't temporary. This was abandonment dressed up as discipline, and I would never forget it. Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert were good people. That's important to say because without them, this story might have ended very differently. But good people doesn't mean prepared to suddenly raise a 16-year-old girl who was dropped on their doorstep like an unwanted package. They lived in a small 3-bedroom house in rural Pennsylvania. Quiet roads, early sunsets, the kind of place where time moves slower whether you wanted it to or not. They gave me the guest room, neatly made, faintly smelling of lavender, clearly not meant to be permanent. Nothing about my presence felt permanent. The first thing I noticed was how quiet everything was. No phone, no notifications, no familiar voices. My parents had made it very clear I was not to use the landline except for emergencies. My internet access was monitored. When I tried to email a friend from my aunt's computer once, she gently reminded me that she'd been told to keep an eye on what I was doing. Not because she wanted to, because my parents didn't want me controlling the narrative. So I stopped trying. In 2012, not having a phone or social media was like being erased. I wondered if my friends back home thought I'd just disappeared, if my parents told people I was troubled, if anyone questioned it. School started in late August. I enrolled as a junior at the local high school 3 weeks after everyone else. I didn't know a single person. I was the weird new girl with no Instagram, no Snapchat, no explanation. When people asked where I'd moved from, I'd say, family stuff. When they asked for my socials, I'd say I didn't have any. They'd stare at me like I'd admitted I didn't believe in electricity. I ate lunch alone, did my homework alone, spent weekends in my room reading textbooks and library books like they were life rafts. Teachers noticed. I could tell. Here was this student with excellent academic records, always prepared, always quiet, sitting by herself day after day. I saw my guidance counselor watching me once, probably debating whether loneliness qualified as something he could intervene in. It didn't, but loneliness gives you time, too much time. I thought about my childhood, about how Jackson's mistakes were always softened while mine were magnified, about how my parents had blamed me instead of holding him accountable, about how easily they'd removed me from their lives when I stopped fitting their story. And slowly, something inside me hardened. Not into rage. Rage burns out. This was colder than that. Focus. I decided that if they wanted to throw me away, fine. But I would succeed without them. I threw myself into school like it was a lifeline. Studied every night until my aunt had to tell me to turn off my light. Joined the debate team because it didn't require friends and looked good on college applications. Volunteered at the local library on weekends. I kept busy because being busy meant not thinking. After about 2 months, Uncle Robert pulled me aside in the garage one evening. "You okay?" he asked gently. I nodded. "I'm fine, just trying to stay productive." He studied me for a long moment, then said quietly, "You know this situation isn't fair to you, right?" It was the first time anyone in my family had said that. I almost cried right there among the boxes and tools. He went on, "Your parents handled this all wrong, but you're doing the right thing, focusing on your future. Don't let their mistakes define you." Something shifted after that. I realized I didn't have to accept my parents' version of reality. I could build my own. My aunt called my parents once a week to update them. I'd hear her through the walls. "She's doing well in school, honor roll again. No, she hasn't asked about coming home." That last part became true quickly. After 3 months, I knew I didn't want to go back. Christmas that year was strange. My parents sent a box with generic gifts, a sweater in the wrong size, a gift card to a restaurant that didn't exist in Pennsylvania, and a card that said, "Hope you're learning and growing." No call, no apology. I sent nothing back. Months passed, then a year. I finished junior year with a 4.0 GPA. Senior year, I took every AP class available. I wrote my college essay about adversity and self-reliance without naming names. I got accepted to a state university with a partial scholarship. Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert were thrilled. They offered to help cover the rest. I said no. I'd been saving every dollar from my library job. I needed to do this on my own. My mom called once when she found out. "Congratulations," she said stiffly. "We're proud." I thanked her politely. When she suggested I come home before college, I declined. I left that fall and never looked back. College was hard, but familiar in its difficulty. I worked 2 jobs, studied constantly, stayed busy. I dated a man during junior year, kind, well-meaning, but when he suggested I forgive my parents, we didn't last. Some people don't understand survival-level boundaries. Law school was worse, brutal, competitive, exhausting. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered being 16, standing in my aunt's driveway with a suitcase, watching my father drive away. And I kept going. By the time I passed the bar and started working in juvenile defense, I'd learned something crucial. Hard work was my refuge. And justice felt personal. 13 years passed with almost no contact. No apologies, no accountability. Just silence. Until one Tuesday morning, when my secretary knocked on my office door and said, "You have a walk-in consultation." The names on the form didn't register. At first. At the time, it was just another Tuesday. I was reviewing case files, half focused, half running on muscle memory. 3 years into practicing law will do that to you. You learn how to compartmentalize. You learn how to keep emotions neatly boxed so they don't bleed into the work. My secretary knocked lightly and poked her head in. "I have a walk-in consultation for you." "Send them in," I said without looking up. She hesitated. "They didn't schedule ahead of time, said it was urgent." "That's fine," I replied. "Who's the client?" She glanced at the intake form. "Janet and David Stevens." The name didn't register. Stevens is common. If I reacted every time a last name sounded familiar, I'd never get any work done. "Okay," I said, "send them in." The door opened, and suddenly the air in my office felt different. I looked up from my desk and froze. My mother and father stood in the doorway. 13 years older, grayer, smaller, somehow, like time had worn them down instead of polishing them. My mom's hair was almost entirely gray now, pulled back neatly. My dad's shoulders were slumped, the confidence he used to carry replaced with something brittle and tired. They stared at me like they'd walked into the wrong room. My mom gasped, actually gasped. My dad's mouth fell open. They stood there, unmoving, like they'd just seen a ghost. For a moment, I thought I might feel something dramatic. Anger, rage, vindication, the urge to scream. Instead, I felt calm, detached, like I was observing a scene that no longer belonged to me. "Mr. and Mrs. Stevens," I said, closing the file in front of me. "Please have a seat." My voice sounded professional, polite, neutral. They didn't move right away. My mom found her voice first. "Andrea?" she whispered. "Is that really you?" Hearing my name in her voice felt strange, like hearing an old song played at the wrong speed. "Yes," I said evenly. "It's me. You're here for a consultation." They finally shuffled forward and sat down across from my desk. My dad kept staring at me like he was trying to reconcile the teenager he'd exiled with the woman sitting in front of him. I was wearing a tailored blazer. My desk was neat. My law degree was framed on the wall behind me, something they hadn't even known I earned. This was my space. And for once, they were the ones who didn't belong. We had no idea," my mom stammered. "We were looking for an attorney and someone recommended this firm. We didn't know it would be you." "Interesting," I said. "What brings you in today?" They exchanged a glance. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. "It's Jackson." There it was. I raised an eyebrow. "What about him?" My mom's composure cracked instantly. Tears spilled over as she fumbled for a tissue. Real tears this time. Desperate ones. "He's been arrested," my dad said quietly. I nodded, making notes on my legal pad. "What are the charges?" "Embezzlement," he said. "About $45,000 over 2 years." I wrote it down, giving myself a moment to absorb the irony. The golden child, still making choices, still being defended. "Do they have evidence?" I asked. My dad's jaw tightened. "Yes, bank records, forged invoices." "So he's facing serious time," I said calmly. My mom leaned forward, eyes pleading. "His public defender just wants him to take a plea. They don't care about him. We need someone who will fight, someone who understands he's a good person who made mistakes." I set my pen down. "I don't handle adult cases," I said. "My specialty is juvenile defense. Jackson is, 27 now?" Her hope visibly drained. "Oh," she whispered, "we didn't realize." "However," I continued, "I do know several excellent criminal defense attorneys who handle white-collar crimes. I'd be happy to give you referrals." I began writing names. That's when my mom finally said it. "We're so sorry, Andrea. We had no idea you became an attorney. We're so proud of you." I looked up. 13 years. 13 years of silence, of abandonment, of no apology. And now they were proud. "With all due respect," I said, my tone still controlled, "you've had 13 years to be proud of me. 13 years to apologize, to reach out, to acknowledge what you did." My dad shifted uncomfortably. "We thought you needed space." "No," I said firmly. "You blamed me for Jackson's crimes and threw me away because it was easier than holding him accountable." My mom whispered, "We made mistakes." "Yes," I agreed, "you did." I slid the list of referrals across the desk. These attorneys will give Jackson a fair shot. I'll recommend them personally. That's it? My dad asked. You're not going to help us? What exactly were you expecting? I asked calmly. That I'd drop everything to save the brother who stayed silent while you blamed me? My mom pressed her hands together. We're family. I smiled, not warmly. Family, I repeated. You know what I learned living with Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert? They said nothing. Family isn't blood, I continued. It's who shows up, who believes you. They did. You didn't. The room was silent. I stood, signaling the end of the consultation. I hope Jackson gets a good outcome, but I'm not that attorney. They stood slowly. At the door, my mom turned back. For what it's worth, we really are proud of you. I accomplished everything without you, I replied. That's the part you need to understand. They left without another word. I sat back down at my desk, staring at the closed door, my hands steady. Some people call it karma. I call it closure. They didn't try contacting me again for a few weeks after that meeting. I half expected a follow-up email, a voicemail, something emotional, something dramatic, but nothing came, just silence. The same silence they'd mastered for 13 years. About a month later, I heard through one of the attorneys I'd referred them to that Jackson had taken a plea deal. 18 months in minimum security, 5 years of probation. Not a great outcome, but not the worst either. Apparently, my parents had asked about me, asked if there was any way to reconnect. The attorney told me later that he'd passed along my response exactly as I'd given it. No. A week after that, a letter arrived at my office. My mother's handwriting. I almost threw it away without opening it. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the envelope like it might bite me. Curiosity won. It usually does. The letter was 4 pages long. She apologized for everything, for blaming me, for sending me away, for cutting me off, for choosing Jackson over me again and again. She admitted they'd been in denial about his issues, that they'd been terrible parents to me, that they'd realized it too late. She wrote that she understood if I never wanted to see them again. She just wanted me to know how sorry they were. There were photos tucked inside, pictures of my graduation, my first job, moments they hadn't been there for. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in my desk drawer. I didn't respond. 3 weeks later, my secretary buzzed me. Your mother is on the line, she said carefully. Do you want me to tell her you're unavailable? I stared at the blinking light on my phone for a full 30 seconds. Then I picked up. Andrea Shimka, I said. Professional, neutral. Andrea, my mom said. Her voice was shaky. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I needed to tell you. Jackson took the plea deal. I know, I said. One of the attorneys mentioned it. It's not that, she said quickly. He wrote you a letter. He wants to apologize. He asked me to send it to you. Don't, I said. She inhaled sharply. He's struggling. He wants to explain. He wants to tell you he's sorry for not defending you back then. I don't care, I interrupted. My voice wasn't angry. It was calm, clear. Silence. I'm not holding on to anger, I continued. I'm not waiting for apologies. I've moved on. My life is good. You're not part of it. And Jackson isn't either, she whispered. But he's still your brother. No, I said gently. He's someone I used to know who shares my DNA. That's all. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I said no, and that was the last conversation we ever had. 8 months have passed since then. Jackson started his sentence in February. My parents visit him every week. I hear he's doing fine. Good. That's what parents are supposed to do, show up for their kids. Meanwhile, I got promoted last month. Senior associate, bigger office, better cases, a raise that still feels unreal. I'm working on a juvenile sentencing reform case now, one that could actually change things. Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert drove 8 hours to take me out to dinner when I told them. Uncle Robert gave me an engraved pen, said it was for signing important things. They were there when I graduated, when I moved into my first apartment, when I doubted myself. They're my family. Last week, I represented a 16-year-old who'd been caught holding illegal substances for his older brother. The prosecutor wanted to charge him as an adult. The kid swore he didn't know what was in the bag. I believed him. I got the charges reduced. Probation, counseling, no felony record. His parents hugged me in the hallway afterward, crying with relief. You're an incredible attorney, the mother said. Your parents must be so proud. I smiled. The people who matter are, I said. And that's the truth. I didn't win because I got revenge. I didn't win because they suffered. I won because I built a life so full that their absence doesn't hurt anymore. I'm not the girl they threw away. I'm the woman they'll never get to know, and I'm completely at peace with that.